I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited that you're all here, so that's why I'm excited to be here. I give this talk just every morning in the mirror, and it's not that exciting, so this is it for me. This is the big time. So I'm here to prove to you that tolerance is bullshit, and I hope that when you leave, you will not only recognize that tolerance is bullshit, but you'll stop using the concept of tolerance out there in the world, because there are much better ones that not only aren't bullshit, but that do the work that a lot of people think that tolerance is doing, but that it's not. The talk has got 3 parts to it. In part 1, I'll prove to you that tolerance is bullshit. If that's what you were here for, you can leave after the first part. In part 2, I'll prove to you that there is no norm of tolerance. I'll tell you what that means when I get there. And in part 3, I'll show you that tolerance makes us positively harebrained. I'll tell you what that means when we get there too. When I was putting together the talk, I decided that I was going to make a flow chart of how this talk was going to go, how everything was going to work. So here's what my flow chart looks like for the talk, and for you figuring out whether you're using the concept of tolerance and whether the way that you use it is bullshitty. You can ask yourself, did you invoke tolerance? If the answer is no, well, hey, great job, keep up the good work, just don't use it ever. But if the answer is yes, well, ask yourself, can you define the concept of tolerance? If no, we've got some bullshit on our hands. If yes, well, tell us then, what is it that makes tolerance tolerance? If you don't know, bullshit. If you say, well, maybe we can give you an easier task. Can you sort example cases into the ones that are the tolerant cases and the non-tolerant or intolerant cases? It's a little easier than giving a definition. If not, we still got some bullshit on our hands. If maybe, here's where I go with diamond. Are you sure that tolerance, the way you're using it, is a moral norm? Because it seems like it's supposed to be. I'm going to be making this available on the internet, but if no, bullshit. If yeah, you're sure, are you really sure that you haven't confused tolerance with respect? Because those are 2 different things. Whoops, if you made that mistake, you've been bullshitting out there. If you didn't confuse tolerance with respect, then what exactly is it that you're talking about when you're saying something is tolerant or tolerance is good? We're back to bullshit if you don't know, and back over to defining tolerance if you just yell tolerance and put an exclamation point after it. Now, at this point, you're just totally confused because somebody's been asking you to define a term that you've been using. You say, pentagon. You may have gone fully harebrained. And if you say, huh, what's that? That's you. You're a harebrain. That's a hair. So let me say all of that, but not so prettily. Part 1. In which it is proved that tolerance is bullshit. There's a philosopher out there by the name of Harry Frankfurt. That's what he looks like. And in 1985, he published a paper called On Bullshit. A few years later, some people smelled a market opportunity and took that 20-page article and made the font really big and bound it into a book that you can buy at Barnes & Noble for like $12.95. Don't. But that's out there as well. If you don't like this happy smiling picture, there's that one as well, and there's more of a beard going on. Now, oftentimes when people say that something is bullshit, or that someone is a bullshitter, or someone is bullshitting, they're confusing bullshitting with lying. So I want to lay out the difference between truth-telling and lying before we get into what bullshitting actually is. Here's one of our most famous presidents, Benjamin Harrison. If he's hanging around one day and maybe, I don't know, Rutherford B. Hayes, one of our other very famous presidents, is hanging around with him, and they spy on the horizon a pineapple. By the way, the Enlightenment philosophers were just obsessed with pineapples. Go just find some Hume, and he's just like talking about pineapples all the time. It's really weird. Anyway. President Harrison says, that is definitely a pineapple, says it to himself. So he believes that's a pineapple, and he says, hey, yo, Ruff, check out that dope pineapple over there. And Rutherford B. Hayes says, indeed, Benjamin, that pineapple is a really nice one. If this happens, then Benjamin Harrison is a truth teller. He believes it's a pineapple. He tells Rutherford B. Hayes that it's a pineapple. Paradigm case of telling the truth. But it might not go this way. If instead, Benjamin Harrison believes that that is definitely a pineapple, but he says, yo, Ruth, check out that dope summer squash over there. And Rutherford B. Hayes says, indeed, yes, I like that summer squash. That looks really good. That makes Benjamin Harrison a big fat liar. Notice why. He's tried to mislead our 19th president. I'm pretty sure that's right. 18 was grand. Now, it doesn't even have to be the case that Rutherford B. Hayes believes the lie. He can say, excuse me, I'm pretty sure that that is a pineapple. Doesn't stop Benjamin Harrison from having been a liar. Somebody doesn't have to believe you in order for you to have lied. You just have to try to misrepresent what you take to be the truth. And it doesn't even have to be the case that you get things right in order to be a liar. So if Benjamin Harrison misunderstands what's going on and says that is definitely a banana out there when it's a pineapple, and he says, hey, Ruth, check out that dope lemon over there. And at this point, Rutherford B. Hayes, he's going to go reunite the country and stuff. Benjamin Harrison is still a liar. So what is it that makes lying lying? A person lies when she or he, if you don't know the academic convention here, I'm not saying she because women are more liarful, less truthworthy. Then that's just, we do that for some reason, so there it is. A person lies when she believes that something is the case and then attempts to get others to believe that the opposite is the case, or that the thing that they think is the case isn't. Thus, what makes something a lie is primarily the intentions of the person that's saying the thing. If you're intending to mislead somebody else, whether they believe you or not, whether you are getting the world right or not, you're a liar. A dirty, stinking, terrible liar. To lie, then, a person has to be concerned with the truth. Since to lie, a person has to believe that the truth is one thing, and then try to get others to believe that the truth is something else. So to be concerned with the truth here doesn't mean concerned with getting other people to believe the truth. It just means paying attention to, caring about the truth. I'm worried because this next slide has the same title. Oh, there's just two of them. It was such a good slide that I put it in here twice. Good for me. Bullshit, on the other hand, in Frankfurt's sense of the term, is language that's produced for some purpose, but whose producer is unconcerned with the truth or the falsity of the language that they're producing, of the proposition that the language expresses. To be unconcerned here really does mean to have no concern at all. The producer of bullshit isn't trying to say something true, isn't trying to say something false, and sometimes it helps to think of bullshit as just words being said at somebody rather than to them, since understanding isn't the point of producing bullshit. So just to compare bullshit and lying here, The bullshitter is unconcerned with the truth or falsity of the language that they produce. The liar, on the other hand, is very concerned with the truth or falsity of the language that they produce, since to lie, a person has to say what they think is false. The liar has to have strong beliefs about what they're saying and whether what they're saying is true or false. And since the bullshitter is unconcerned with the truth or the falsity of the language that they produce, some bullshit might be true, some bullshit might be false. It just doesn't matter. At least it doesn't matter to the bullshitter. Now, most of us think that a lie is generally a bad thing. You don't have to be a dyed-in-the-wool Kantian like me to think that a lie is a very bad thing. And most people think that if we should lie at all, we should only lie when doing so is the lesser of two evils. So generally the default position, don't lie. That's what most of us think. Bullshit isn't a lie. It on its own is neither good nor bad. Bullshit can be used for good, it can be used for bad. It can be produced in circumstances where it's clear that what's going on is bullshit. Like, for example, political rallies, oftentimes what's going on is a sort of group bonding experience, and nobody there thinks that, whatever somebody is saying when they're introducing whomever is true. It's just like how we pat each other on the back. Or bullshit can be produced in circumstances where others think that the bullshitter is attempting to tell the truth. That's a problem oftentimes when somebody is just saying words and people think, oh, that person's definitely trying to tell the truth. Depending on what you think of current political circumstances, a face might come to mind. You know who that would be. Now, how do we determine or tell what bullshit is? Since bullshit is language that's produced with a disregard for the truth value of the propositions expressed by that language. That's a lot of philosophy words in a row. Determining whether any particular bit of language is bullshit or not requires assessing two different things. One is the intentions of the speaker. Is the person trying to say something that's true, trying to say something that's false, or do they just not care at all about whether what they're saying is true or false? And the attention of the speaker. Is the person paying attention to the words that are coming out of their mouth? Are they trying to say words that have a particular truth value or not? Now, this can be really difficult since intentions of people and the attention of people are internal to the speaker, him or herself. That is, only the speaker can tell with certainty what her intentions are and what she's paying attention to. So it might seem to you like someone's really trying to tell the truth or really trying to lie, like they're really paying attention, and you just might not know. They might just be bullshitting. They might be thinking about Pokemon Go, and they're just totally bullshitting. But there's a tool that we can use, we outsiders, we people who are outside of the head of the person who might be bullshitting, in order to try to detect bullshit. So as we've said, determining whether something is bullshit or not requires assessing the intentions and attention of the speaker, neither of which can be conclusively determined by a third party from the outside. But to intend to say something that's true is to attempt to do at least a minimally adequate job of describing how things actually are. Minimally adequate job. You can't try to say something true if you're not trying at all to describe how things actually are. And even further, to be paying attention to the relevant portion of reality that's referenced by one's language is to at least have some minimal idea of which portion of reality it is that's referenced by one's language. I can't try to say something true about the overhead there if I just have no idea what an overhead is. I'm using that language. So if we can have good reasons for thinking that a person, one, isn't attempting to do at least a minimally adequate job of describing how things actually are, and, or two, doesn't have some minimal idea of which portion of reality they're trying to talk about, then we should think that bullshit's afoot. So here's bullshit. We've talked about that. I want to talk a little about tolerance, the thing that I'm claiming is bullshit. I'm supposed to be introducing tolerance here. I'm not entirely sure what it is. Well, I know this. It's totally a good thing. Tolerance, definitely. It's definitely a good thing. And I know that, well, its opposite is a bad thing. Okay, we're getting somewhere. And something about diversity and united we stand, I think that goes along with tolerance. I've seen bumper stickers that might have to do with this. And almost certainly peace and love and harmony and togetherness, those go along there with tolerance. And oh yeah, America, right? We're the best at tolerance, and I think we might have invented it, and it's definitely in the Constitution, or it might be the Declaration of Independence, or the Committees of Correspondence, or something like that. It's in there, though. I really like this slide, that's fine. Bullshit! I won't do it again, I don't want to have a heart attack. Now, how do we know that all that stuff I just said is bullshit? Well, the person who's invoking the concept of tolerance can't seem to provide even an informal definition of tolerance. We're not asking for some logically precise definition that gives all the necessary and sufficient conditions. Just even gesturing at what tolerance is seems to be too difficult for most people who use the concept of tolerance. And the person is invoking the concept of tolerance but can't reliably say what example cases of tolerance have that other cases lack. So for example, you tell me, somebody says a bunch of words, a person gets up from the table and walks away looking angry. Tolerance or not? I bet there is just a split in this room. How about this one? Person says a bunch of words, the person sitting at the table says, I think that's ridiculous, and I think that's morally horrible, and I think you're a bad person, and I don't ever want to see you again. Tolerance or not? I bet we'd be split on that. Or maybe the person invoking the concept of tolerance can't reliably tell which of two example cases is one of tolerance and which isn't. I think I screwed up the order here, but you know, all the words are up there, so just make it sound like I sounded smart. So what is it about tolerance that's bullshit that I'm claiming here? Well, what I'm saying, strictly, isn't that tolerance itself is bullshit, but that the invocation of the concept of tolerance is bullshit. When a person says that they're tolerant, or that you should be tolerant, or that tolerance is a good thing, or that we're a tolerant country, or this is a tolerant religion, or whatever, what they're doing is bullshit. And they might not recognize that they're bullshitting. They should listen to me more. But you all will at that point after this. But if we ask them to just define tolerance, just say, I'm sorry, I'm not totally sure what that word means. Can you tell me what that is? And can you also tell me why that's supposed to be a good thing? That'll do the trick in telling whether the person invoking tolerance is bullshitting or not. Part 2, in which it's proved that there's no norm of tolerance. Well, if I've already proved to you what the title of the thing is all about, why am I going on here? Well, I don't just think that people bullshit when they use the term tolerance. I think that the concept of tolerance itself is a mongrel concept that oftentimes isn't even internally consistent and that can't possibly be a norm in the sense that most people think it's supposed to be. Here's why. So tolerance is at least supposed to be a moral norm of some sort. Now, if you think that moral norms are just total nonsense, well, cool, we're already maybe on the same page here because you don't use tolerance anyway because you think that there are no moral norms, so that's easy. Now, if something's a moral norm, then all other things being equal, it's better to follow that norm than not to follow it. And I really do mean everything else here being equal. So if the only difference between two cases is that one of them possesses a moral norm being followed and the other one lacks it, then the first one is supposed to be better. It's what it is to be a moral norm. And this is objective betterness here. It's not just a mere preference. It's not like you like tolerance. When people say that tolerance is a norm, we ought to be tolerant, they actually mean what they're saying. We ought to be tolerant. It's better to be tolerant. Societies that are tolerant are good ones, and the ones that aren't are bad ones. And so, thus, just adding all of that together, all other things being equal, it's supposed to be the case that objectively, being tolerant is better than not being tolerant. That's what's supposed to be the case, at least. I'm going to give you just a few obvious examples that show that that is not the case at all. First, something we all agree with, tolerance can be overridden by other things. Imagine that your friend, Brian, says, hey, come on over to my house. And I go, not Brian. Everything's not about you. Imagine your friend says, hey, come on over and play with my giant dog. Ah, look at that. I found it on here. And you show up, and your friend, Ryan, who has since changed his name to Brian, so you've got a weird friend, says, all right, let's get to it. Let's take this dog apart. You wouldn't be like, okie doke, I guess. I don't understand why, but might as well be tolerant. You would knock that drill out of there, and you would be just like a Superman child, defender of all the defenseless puppies. So you don't always think that tolerance is a good thing. Sometimes, at least, you think that tolerance can be overridden by other norms, that you should not be tolerant in certain circumstances. Now, that doesn't prove that it's not a moral norm. It just proves that it's not an absolute moral norm. Fine. How about this? Tolerance isn't always the better option, everything else being equal. Imagine that you've got a friend, Jiminy. There he is. Now Jiminy really wants to go get himself a used car. And he says, I'm off to the used car emporium. And then instead of walking towards it, he just flips around and walks in the other direction. If you said, ho, that way, and he said, come on, man, be tolerant, you would say, are you trying to get to the used car emporium or not? If you are, it's that way. I mean, eventually, you go that way, you know. But, so you wouldn't be tolerant of his going in the wrong direction. I mean, you might not pick him up and bring him there or something, but you wouldn't show tolerance for his going in the wrong direction, because non-tolerance there would be better. Or how about this? Tolerance can be positively immoral. When I was searching for an email about this event and I typed tolerance into my email, I found some really good examples of how tolerance might be positively immoral. Here are just three of them. This one from today. Bias and discrimination have no place on Airbnb, and we have zero tolerance for them. That's bias and discrimination. This one from every CU Boulder security alert email. CU Boulder will not tolerate acts of sexual misconduct, discrimination, harassment, or related retaliation against or by any employee or student. Tolerate that. Or this one from a little while back. Meanwhile, Dr. Carson said some Syrian refugees are like rabid dogs and referred to the rest of Syrian refugees as just dogs, not rabid. This disgusting rhetoric cannot be tolerated, says the Bernie Sanders campaign. Were Airbnb or CU Boulder or the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign to tolerate discrimination, sexual misconduct, calling humans dogs, they'd be doing something immoral. Well, if tolerance can be immoral, then it's certainly not a moral norm. So all things being equal, if it's a moral norm, then it's objectively better to be tolerant than to not be tolerant. But as we've seen, not only can tolerance be overridden, it's not even true that it's always better to be tolerant, and in fact, sometimes it is downright immoral to behave with tolerance. So it doesn't seem as though tolerance is a moral norm. Wait a minute, you might say, and write it up there. Don't we know that it's better not to decide that somebody is wrong without first trying to understand them? Don't we all know that? And don't we know that different people can have different preferences and that we don't need to have those exact same preferences in order to live a good life and get along with them? And don't we know that if we disagree with somebody, we shouldn't harm them or imprison them or kill them? Isn't that supposed to be the essence of tolerance? Maybe I've just picked out some other thing. I'm calling some other thing tolerance, and then I've just beaten up on it. Isn't that tolerance? Isn't saying that those are good things what we mean when we say that tolerance is a good thing? No, it's not. Because tolerance isn't the same thing as respect. Tolerance isn't understanding or learning or empathizing or treating others like members of the shared rational human community. That's called respect. And I'm not just arguing over terminology here. There's some good reasons why tolerance and respect shouldn't be considered the same thing. Tolerance, that's passive. It requires you to just get out of the way of others. It requires you not to engage critically with their lives. To tolerate is to treat somebody as a thing to be avoided. Respect, on the other hand, is active. It requires you to recognize that if other people are doing something that you don't do, hey, they might have reasons why they're doing what they're doing. And that if something's a reason, it's the sort of thing that you yourself can ask about, can understand, can evaluate. None of that stuff is tolerated. Tolerating is turning your back and shutting your mouth. Even further, to tolerate something, you're going to find it painful or unpleasant or offensive. We tolerate pain. We don't tolerate pizza or puppies or other great things that start with P. Puddles. Yay. You don't have to tolerate that stuff. Oh man, I was totally tolerating some awesome pizza earlier. Do you mean enjoying? To tolerate a person, that's to treat that person as the sort of thing that can't possibly be reasoned with, can't be understood, can't be talked to. To tolerate a person is to treat that person as a thing that is categorically different from you, such that it couldn't even possibly have reasons for what it's doing. That person is like a sunburn. It's a painful nuisance that you hope goes away pretty soon. Don't try to reason with a sunburn. Try. And that's the horrible irony of this whole thing. The mythology that surrounds tolerance would have you believe that to be tolerant is to be inclusive, loving, wonderful. But to be tolerant is to be exclusive. It's to be a mean girl. October 3rd is coming. Look at that. It's to be exclusive to the point that what's tolerated is no longer considered one of us. It's just an awful thing that's out there that you need to deal with. tolerance isn't immoral. Proved. Part 3, in which it's proved that tolerance makes us harebrained. Harebrained, you say? Were you reading the thesaurus? Yes, I was. Thank you. To be harebrained is to have the brain of a hare. Or, more specifically, it's to be squishy-minded, conceptually careless, intellectually lazy, foolish, witless, imprudent, otherwise unwise. But even worse, it's to be content with that sort of squishy-mindedness. It's to be satisfied with your injudicious behavior, so satisfied as to resist the attempts of others to treat you as the intelligent person that you are. And that's a real tragedy. It's no great loss that a hare is harebrained. That's what hares do. It's how they flourish. Go out and you look at a hare and you're like, stop being so conceptually lazy. You've misunderstood what's going on there. It is a great loss if you're harebrained. Not only because you're not stupid, because you're actually pretty smart. So to be harebrained isn't to be a stupid, dumb idiot. It's to be a smart, intellectually lazy person. I needed to sneak the word phenomenology into a talk. There it is. Reasons are all around you. And we're not taught appropriately to recognize reasons. We should be in kindergarten. We should say, look at all the reasons. You see them everywhere. You can actually experience reasons as embedded in the manifest world around you, the world as it appears to you when you walk around. You can see them with your senses. So how do you know to turn left rather than to turn right when you're going home? You can see that that's the way to go. It's not that there's a big arrow on the street. You feel it. That is the way to go. You know how to get home, and that's it. How do you know to close your windows when a downpour begins? You can hear that things will otherwise get soaked. That's reason knocking on your ears. How do you know that you should tighten your grip on the steering wheel when it starts to slip? You can feel with your tactile senses that otherwise you'll lose control. So you're given reason through your eyes, through your ears, through your hands. When you smell the pizza, you were given reason to come into this room. Well, let's talk about reasons, because I'm about to talk about freedom. Imagine how empty of real, actual possibilities your life would be if you couldn't experience reasons all around you. Not only would you lose the real possibilities that you have, possibilities to go this way rather than that one, possibilities to talk to this person rather than that one, you'd lose your freedom because you wouldn't recognize what you could do anymore. Some of you might know it's not a real story, but the story of the donkey who's perfectly rational and sits between the two bales of hay and starves to death. That's not really a perfectly rational donkey. It's a donkey who has no reason to go one way rather than another one, has no freedom, dies. When we tolerate somebody, we treat them as the sort of thing that doesn't have reasons in the way that we do. What we're saying in essence is that that person's life is so impoverished in a way that ours isn't, that they aren't free in the sort of way that we are. And not only do we pretend that they aren't free in the way that we are, we actually lose possibilities in terms of our interactions with them. We become stubborn and dogmatic. We lose the freedom of seeing their life as full of legitimate possibilities for us. Imagine seeing somebody doing something different and being able to say to yourself, that's not a person, they don't have reasons, they're just to be tolerated, their like a sunburn. You're never going to try out that thing, except by accident, maybe. So if you're just totally selfish, you don't care about denying them your freedom, you lose freedom too, you totally selfish people. When we tolerate somebody, we treat them as unable to appreciate reason, and as not providing us with any reasons either, in the same way as that desk provides me with no reason to sit around like this all the time, because it's a desk. Someone I'm tolerating provides me with no reason to try things out the way they're doing. In tolerating someone, we treat people as unreasonable, non-reasonable, a-reasonable. And in doing so, we make ourselves unreasonable too. And in all of that reason denying that we get ourselves into in tolerating, we're making ourselves and others less free. We're choosing, paradoxically, to live impoverished lives, to live lives with some of the vibrancy and the color and the possibility drained out of them. All right, Andrew, I buy all of that, so should I be intolerant? No, listen to me. Tolerance and intolerance are at best mongrel concepts that occasionally, accidentally latch on to actual moral norms like respect. At worst, they are freedom vampires, which is exactly what it sounds like. They suck your freedom. If tolerance is unusable as a concept, then so is intolerance, the flip side. If we shouldn't use tolerance, we shouldn't use intolerance either when we're out there in the world. So don't attempt to be intolerant. Don't attempt to be tolerant. Attempt to be reasonable, and at least you'll be on the right path. Maybe a lot of the time you'll screw up in assessing your reasons, but at least you're, get it. But wait a minute, Andrew, what happens if I disagree with somebody out there in the world? Well, first, that's just what it feels like to be alive, so welcome, don't run from that. Being alive is sometimes a little bit scary. Second, you should determine whether you actually have a disagreement on your hands. A lot of times when people think they disagree with somebody else, what's actually going on is they have a preference, another person has a different preference, but there's no actual disagreement. I've been telling this ice cream parlor story to my students this semester, so for those of you who are my students, here it is again. Imagine that you and I go to the ice cream parlor and I say, hey, what ice cream are you gonna get? And you say chocolate, and I go, wrong. You can't be wrong. You like chocolate. If I don't like chocolate, we're not disagreeing with each other. If you actually do find yourself disagreeing with somebody else, you've got a legitimate disagreement on your hands. Awesome. I mean, that doesn't happen very much. You'd be surprised how much we all agree with each other. Y'all somehow managed to make it here and sit down and be quiet. Look at how much we all agree with each other about this arbitrary thing. If you do have a disagreement, though, now you have a chance to see exactly why you disagree. What reasons you and your disagreeant have. What reconciliation might look like. You've been given a gift in disagreement. It's a chance to be rational, to be reasonable, to be understanding and empathetic and compassionate, and best of all, human. Because the sort of thing that you and I can do that hares can't do is assess reasons and then act because of them. But wait a minute, Andrew, isn't everybody entitled to their opinion? No, stop saying that. If two people disagree about something, and if it's an actual disagreement, at least one of them is wrong. That's just the way the world works. Dogs don't both exist and not exist. In no sense of the term entitlement can someone be entitled to be wrong. Not morally, not legally, not aesthetically, not epistemically. You can't find a sense of entitlement where you're entitled to be wrong. And hell, if you want to talk about rights too, since sometimes people say they have a right to their opinion, yeah, it doesn't make sense in terms of rights either. But even further, this doesn't have anything to do with tolerance. To respond to an entitlement, even if people were entitled to their opinion, is to do something active. It's to recognize they've done something and that you have to do something in response. Tolerance is just to sit there and not do anything. Close your mouth, shut your eyes if you have to, grin and bear it, because that's all there is. Now here's a bold claim. Tolerance is actually the opposite of being alive. To employ the concept of tolerance is to just be mindless. It's to be confronted with reasons and evidence that other people are using reasons and then to just go. It's to repeat empty platitudes despite having no idea what you're talking about. Tolerance is good. We should be tolerant. We should put that in our mission statement. Tolerance is good. It's to allow a concept, tolerance, that you unthinkingly adopted from the culture to dictate how seriously you're going to take other people. You're going to let a concept tell you how seriously to take other human persons. And finally, it's to surrender your freedom and the freedom of others to an internally incoherent ideology that's not of your making and not of your choosing. And if that's not shooting ourselves in the human foot, then I don't know what is. Thanks.